Modern bikes may look advanced, but they're still living in the shadow of Japan's 1980s war machines. These were the motorcycles that rewrote the rules. Monsters built with no safety nets, no electronics, and no limits. In this countdown, you're going to feel the raw speed, the dangerous torque, and the untamed engineering that still humiliates today's so-called superbikes. And by the end, you'll discover the 180s legend that remains so explosive, it's practically banned from the future. Number 20, the Honda CB1100R. The year was 1980, and Honda was not interested in building just another motorcycle. They wanted a statement piece, a road-legal race machine that could dominate endurance events while terrifying anything that dared line up next to it at a stoplight. What they created was the Honda CB1100R, and to this day, it remains one of the purest examples of raw mechanical performance you can still buy and ride. At its core sat a 1,062 cubic centimeter, air-cooled four-stroke inline-four engine. Fed by 4 Keihin carburetors and firing through electronic ignition, it churned out as much as 120 horsepower at 9,000 revolutions per minute, with nearly 72 pound-feet of torque delivered at 8,000. Back then, that meant a top speed north of 140 miles per hour. A figure that still embarrasses plenty of today's middleweight sport bikes. But the CB1100R wasn't just about power. Its reinforced steel twin down-tube chassis gave it the rigidity it needed to conquer production racing. Twin piston brakes, a Honda. First in race-bred suspension turned its 235 pounds of dry weight into a surprisingly balanced and stable ride. On track, the bike won legendary endurance races like the Castrol 6 Hour, proving it was not just fast, but durable enough to take beating after beating without faltering. Today, surviving examples trade hands between $9,000 and $20,000, depending on condition and originality. That price tag doesn't just reflect nostalgia, it reflects a machine whose DNA is still competitive 4 decades later. The CB1100R was never built for comfort or compromise. It was a race bike in street clothes, a symbol of Honda's relentless ambition. But not every rider in the 80s wanted razor-sharp track focus. Some craved bigger comfort and brute force you could unleash anywhere. And that's exactly what one green giant from Akashi delivered. A machine that brought race tech to the open road with muscle you could feel in your chest. Number 19, the Kawasaki GPZ1100. In the early 1980s, Kawasaki dropped a bombshell on the motorcycling world with the GPZ1100, a machine that carried the raw muscle of a big-bore sport bike, but wrapped it in technology that was ahead of its time. Between 1981 and 1985, the GPZ became the weapon of choice for riders who wanted not just speed, but the kind of relentless acceleration and stability that could humiliate just about anything on the road. Its heart was a 1,089 cubic centimeter, air-cooled four-stroke inline-four engine that pushed out just over 100 horsepower at 8,000 revolutions per minute and nearly 70 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers may sound modest by today's spec sheets, but in practice, this bike could rocket from 0 to 60 in under 4.5 seconds and blast past 137 miles per hour. Many of today's so-called middleweight rockets would struggle to match that. And unlike modern bikes softened by electronics, the GPZ1100 gave the rider a raw, direct connection with every twist of the throttle. The chassis was no afterthought. Kawasaki gave it a strong steel double-cradle frame, uni-track rear suspension, considered revolutionary at the time, and dual front discs that made stopping power just as serious as the go. At a curb weight of around 580 pounds, it was no featherweight, but that heft made it supremely stable at high speed, a bike built for covering ground, fast and with confidence. Collectors today know its worth. Clean examples from the early 80s typically sell anywhere from $5,000 to $12,000, a small price for one of the ERA's most formidable machines. The GPZ1100 was a turning point, proof that Japanese engineering could deliver big-bore sport performance with reliability and real-world usability. But Kawasaki wasn't done yet, because their next move would bring turbocharged fury into the equation, rewriting the rulebook all over again. Number 18, the Suzuki GS1100. By 1980, Suzuki was no longer content to play catch-up. They wanted a flagship that could not just compete with the big fours, but dominate them. The result was the Suzuki GS1100, a motorcycle that fused raw muscle with clever engineering. And 4 decades later, it still has the bite to humble many so-called modern superbikes. Its engine was a 1,074 cubic centimeter, air-cooled, dual overhead cam, inline-4, breathing through 4 valves per cylinder, and utilizing Suzuki's innovative twin-swirl combustion chamber design. The result? A claimed 105 horsepower at 8,500 revolutions per minute and nearly 63 pound-feet of torque. That translated to brutal real-world performance. 0 to 60 in roughly 4.3 seconds and a quarter-mile run in just over 11 seconds at a blistering 118 miles per hour. For a bike from the dawn of the decade, those numbers were shocking, and they still stand tall against many of today's middleweights. But the GS1100 wasn't just a drag strip bruiser. Its duplex cradle frame, adjustable Kayaba front forks, dual shocks out back, and twin front disc brakes made it a genuine handler. At just over 550 pounds wet, it balanced stability with surprising agility, giving riders confidence whether carving sweepers or blasting down straights. Collectors know its worth. Clean examples from the early 80s typically sell for between $3,000 and $10,000, depending on condition and originality, with pristine survivor bikes fetching more. The price reflects more than nostalgia. It's proof of a machine whose design and durability still command respect. If the GS1100 gets your heart racing, smash like and drop a hype, and subscribe. That's how we bring you more legends that shook the motorcycle world. The Suzuki GS1100 set the tone for the decade. Muscular, innovative, and unapologetically fast. But just as it looked ready to dominate the roads, Yamaha slammed the door shut, unleashing a long-legged, torque-laden missile that could devour entire states without breaking a sweat. Number 17, the Yamaha FJ1200. By the mid-1980s, Yamaha recognized a truth that riders still know today. Sheer speed is thrilling, but comfort and endurance matter just as much. Their answer was the Yamaha FJ1200, a motorcycle that redefined the sport touring category and still shames many modern machines when it comes to real-world riding. At its core was a 1,188 cubic centimeter, air and oil-cooled inline-4 with 16 valves. It made roughly 125 horsepower and about 81 pound-feet of torque, with a surge of mid-range power that hit like a freight train between 5,000 and 8,000 revolutions per minute. Forget chasing redline figures. The FJ's genius was in its roll-on acceleration, blasting through highway passes and long sweepers with ease. A quarter mile in just over 11 seconds, and a top speed of nearly 145 miles per hour proved this was no touring couch. It was a serious performance machine. Yamaha built the FJ on a sturdy steel perimeter frame, giving it stability and confidence even when loaded down for cross-country miles. The ergonomics were spot on: wide seat, upright bars, a tall windscreen, and a 20-gallon fuel tank that meant you could crush miles all day without punishing your body. This was a bike that could eat states for breakfast and still thrill you in the twisties before dinner. Today, well-kept examples can fetch 5 figures on the US market, reflecting their lasting desirability. The Yamaha FZR1000 wasn't just a sport tourer, it was proof that speed, stamina, and soul could exist in one machine. But for riders who wanted racing heritage you could actually see and feel on the street, a different machine stepped forward. It carried the number plates of a world champion and the attitude of a street fighter. Number 16, the Kawasaki KZ1000R. If the Yamaha FJ1200 was built to crush miles, Kawasaki's KZ1000R was built to crush egos. Nicknamed the Eddie Lawson replica after Kawasaki's I'm a Superbike champion, this was no ordinary street bike. It was a homologation special, a race-winning machine with a license plate. At its core sat a 998 cubic centimeter, air-cooled, dual overhead, cam inline 4, producing just over 100 horsepower and nearly 70 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers may not rattle today's superbike charts, but the way the KZ1000R delivered them was ferocious. Weighing in around 540 pounds, it launched hard off the line, surged past 135 miles per hour, and carried itself with the kind of aggression that modern retro bikes can only pretend to match. The frame was a strengthened steel cradle with revised geometry, giving the KZ sharper handling than the standard KZ models. Add in upgraded suspension and twin front discs, and you had a bike that didn't just go fast in a straight line. It carved corners with the confidence of its race-bred DNA. But the magic of the Eddie Lawson replica wasn't just in the specs. It was the mechanical feel, the raw howl of that inline four, the analog connection between rider and road, and the sense that every mile was a fight worth winning. Today, surviving examples command between $10,000 and $15,000 in the US, cementing their place as both collectibles and still capable weapons. But not every legend came with 4 cylinders or heavyweight presence. Some were small, wild, two-stroke rebels that punched far above their size. That is exactly what is coming next. The kind of bike that made you question everything you thought you knew about speed. Number 15, the Yamaha RZ350. Few motorcycles capture the rebellious, high-octane spirit of the 1980s, quite like the Yamaha RZ350. Known in some markets as the RD, this two-stroke legend wasn't just a machine. It was a declaration that lightweight agility and raw, unfiltered power could take down bikes twice its size. Introduced in 1983, the RZ350 came armed with a liquid-cooled 347 cubic centimeter parallel twin and Yamaha's revolutionary power valve system. The result? Between 50 and nearly 60 horsepower, pushing a bike that tipped the scales at just about 370 pounds fueled. That gave it a power-to-weight ratio so sharp it could embarrass heavier four-strokes of the day and still nip at the heels of modern middleweights. Numbers tell the story. A quarter mile in just over 13 seconds at nearly 100 miles per hour, a top speed brushing 110, and razor-thin throttle response thanks to Mikuni carbs and a slick 6-speed gearbox. The chassis matched the engine's firepower with a perimeter steel frame, monoshock rear suspension, and twin front discs, providing the kind of nimble, confidence-inspiring handling that made the RZ a backroad assassin. Today, original RZs are coveted collectibles, often selling for $10,000 to $17,000 in the US. Their desirability only rising with age. What makes them so prized isn't just nostalgia. It's the fact that few bikes before or since can deliver such explosive fun with such little mass. And here's the kicker. While Yamaha brought the name back in 2025 with a modern twist, it's the original RZ350 that still reigns supreme in riders' hearts. But smoke and fury have their limits. Some riders wanted that race-bred edge in a more serious, four-stroke package. That is where the next machine arrived, with endurance racing DNA baked into every curve of its fairing. Number 14, Kawasaki GPZ750 Turbo. The early 1980s were filled with wild experiments, but none hit harder than Kawasaki's GPZ750 Turbo. This wasn't just a motorcycle, it was Kawasaki's declaration that boost was the future. For a brief shining moment, this bike was the fastest turbocharged production machine on Earth. And 40 years later, it still feels like riding a rolling time bomb strapped with jet fuel. At its core sat a 738 cubic centimeter inline-4 with a factory turbocharger delivering roughly 112 horsepower. That number might not sound outrageous today, but in 1984, it was earth-shattering. Quarter-mile runs in 11.2 seconds at nearly 150 miles per hour put it toe-to-toe with Kawasaki's larger 1100, despite the smaller displacement. And for riders willing to tweak the boost, it was possible to dip into the 10-second range. Performance that will embarrass plenty of modern middleweights even now. Yes, it had quirks. Around town, the steering felt heavy, and the brakes required a strong hand. But crack open the throttle on the highway, let the turbo spool, and suddenly you were catapulted forward in a way no traction-controlled machine can imitate. It wasn't just acceleration, it was an experience, a surge of mechanical drama that riders still chase today. Clean survivors today are climbing in value, with solid examples often trading hands between $3,000 and $6,000 in the US, and pristine low-mileage specimens commanding much more. The GPZ750 Turbo wasn't just Kawasaki's turbo experiment, it was their masterstroke. But here's the question. If Kawasaki built the king of turbos, how did the other Japanese giants answer during that same boost-crazed decade? And in 1983, Honda dropped the hammer with a motorcycle no one saw coming, a monstrous V4 cruiser that could outrun superbikes in a straight line. Number 13, Honda V65 Magna. When Honda rolled out the 65 Magna in the early 1980s, they didn't just build a cruiser, they built a declaration of war. At a time when American highways were dominated by lazy V-twins, Honda dropped in an 1,100 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V4 that shattered expectations. With 116 horsepower on tap and quarter-mile time slipping under 11 seconds, the V65 Magna wasn't just fast for a cruiser, it was the fastest production motorcycle in the world. Top speeds nudging 140 miles per hour made Harley riders shake their heads and left many sport bikes in the rearview mirror. But the Magna wasn't all brute force. Its smooth V4 delivered a refined rush of torque that felt predictable yet intoxicating every time you twisted the throttle. Pullback bars, forward pegs, and a comfortable saddle gave it classic cruiser ergonomics, while the 6-speed transmission, shaft drive, and water cooling added reliability and sophistication unheard of in the segment. It was a bike built to cover miles with ease, but also to embarrass sport machines the moment the light turned green. Today, finding one new is impossible, but clean survivors still surface. In the US, well-kept examples often command $4,000 to $5,000, with pristine, low-mileage bikes demanding more as collectors realize just how special this machine was. The V65 Magna proved that cruisers could be muscle bikes too, fast, refined, and unafraid to challenge superbikes at their own game. But if Honda's Rebel Cruiser could humiliate pure sport machines, wait until you see what happened when they built a V4 dedicated solely to racing, a machine that practically invented the modern superbike formula and still feels viciously effective on a winding road. Number 12, Honda VF750F Interceptor. In 1983, Honda fired a shot that changed the superbike landscape forever. The VF750F Interceptor wasn't just another sport bike. It was the opening chapter in Honda's V4 dynasty. At a glance, it looked like a sharp, angular street machine, but beneath the fairing beat an engine that carried racetrack DNA straight into the showroom. Its 748 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V4 produced a claimed 85 horsepower, delivered with a smooth but urgent surge of torque that made the Interceptor feel alive in every gear. Quarter-mile runs in the low 11-second range and top speeds brushing 135 miles per hour proved this was no pretender. But numbers only tell half the story. The real magic came from the way it carved corners. Lighter and more agile than most leader bikes of its day, the Interceptor gave riders a precision feel that even now, many modern middleweights struggle to match. Honda also stacked it with features well ahead of its time: a 6-speed gearbox, liquid cooling, and race-derived chassis geometry that made it feel planted and confident when pushed hard. This was the bike that taught a whole generation of riders what a true race replica could be like on the street. Today, the VF750 Interceptor still commands respect among collectors, with solid examples typically ranging from $3,000 to $6,000 in the US market. The Interceptor proved that sport bikes didn't have to be brute force machines. They could also be sharp, balanced, and refined. But not every rider wanted to live at redline. Some demanded comfort, range, and a machine that could cross states without breaking a sweat. Honda delivered that too, with a touring legend so durable and dependable it still shames many modern Luxo tourers today. This next legend would take comfort and durability to levels modern touring bikes still struggle to reach. Number 11, Honda GL1200 Goldwing. By the early 1980s, Honda had already proven it could build fast and reliable motorcycles, But with the GL1200 Goldwing, they went one step further. They built a motorcycle that could take 2 riders, a week's worth of luggage, and still cross the country in comfort and style. For touring riders, this wasn't just a machine, it was a revelation. Its 1,182 cubic centimeter flat 4 delivered roughly 94 horsepower with a velvet-smooth character that belied its size. Roll on the throttle and the Goldwing surged forward effortlessly, yet it was the long-haul capability that made it legendary. Oil change intervals stretched up to 8,000 miles. The shaft drive meant virtually maintenance-free reliability. And with Honda's torque-reactive anti-dive control suspension and linked braking system, the GL1200 handled its nearly 730-pound weight with grace, giving riders confidence whether they were gliding through city streets or pounding out highway miles. The Goldwing also spoiled riders with comforts most bikes of the ERA couldn't dream of: a full fairing for wind protection, wide cushioned seats, and amenities that made 1,000-mile days feel possible. Today, clean examples in the U.S. market can be found between $3,000 and $6,000, with well-kept Aspencade models commanding more among collectors who know exactly what this bike represents. The GL1200 Goldwing proved that true endurance wasn't about gadgets or electronics. It was about engineering that lasts. But what happens when we trade long-distance comfort for two-stroke fury and Grand Prix pedigree? That's exactly where our countdown heads next. Number 10, Suzuki RG500 Gamma. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma is the very definition of 1980s race-bred madness brought to the street. Crafted as a 4-stroke GP replica for the public, it channeled Suzuki's dominant 500 cubic centimeter Grand Prix technology into a machine that delivered raw, unfiltered 2-stroke excitement few modern bikes can match. At its heart is a compact, liquid-cooled, square-4 2-stroke engine, producing roughly 80 to 85 rear-wheel horsepower, packed into a lightweight chassis weighing only about 350 pounds with fluids. Twin crankshafts spinning in opposite directions kept vibrations at bay, while Suzuki's automatic exhaust control system unleashed a screaming power band from 7,000 to 10,000 revolutions per minute. Cornering precision comes courtesy of the full-floater, rising-rate rear suspension, revolutionary in its day and still impressive decades late for our. Despite its GP heritage, the RG500 Gamma offered a surprisingly manageable riding position, letting riders tame its explosive character without modern electronic aids. Flickable handling, razor-sharp agility, and that unforgettable 2-stroke rush make every twist of the throttle electrifying. Today, pristine examples command $16,000 to $31,000, reflecting its rarity, engineering brilliance, and cult status. The RG500 Gamma was pure Grand Prix fury for the streets, frantic, unforgiving, and unmatched in its prime. But owning a 500 cubic centimeter 2-stroke meant living with volatility at every throttle crack. For riders who wanted cutting-edge engineering without the smoke, oil, and chaos, the answer came from Yamaha, a 4-stroke revolution that introduced 5 valves per cylinder and forever changed the sound of high-revving performance. Number 9, the Yamaha FZ750. When Yamaha rolled out the FZ750 in 1985, it wasn't just another sport bike, it was a revolution. At its heart sat a 749 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled inline 4 with Yamaha's radical Genesis design. 5 valves per cylinder and a forward-tilted layout that lowered the center of gravity and gave the bike nearly perfect balance. The result, over 100 horsepower screaming past 10,000 RPM, quarter-mile runs in the low 11s, and top speeds well into the 100s 40s. But unlike many razor-edged machines, the FZ750 delivered its power with a smooth, controllable surge that made it just as thrilling on back roads as it was on the strip. With its aluminum twin-spar chassis and agile handling, the Genesis still feels shockingly direct compared with many sanitized modern bikes. The FZ750 showed how advanced valve technology could unleash incredible top-end thrills. But its edgy power delivery wasn't for everyone. Some wanted the same pace wrapped in long-leg stability and smooth refinement. That's when Honda rolled out a leader-class Hurricane, a bike that blended superbike speed with effortless sport touring composure. Number 8. The Honda CBR1000F, the Hurricane. In 1987, Honda unleashed a storm on the motorcycle world, the CBR1000F, better known as the Hurricane. This was no ordinary superbike. It was one of the first true sport tours, blending 130 horsepower of liquid-cooled 16-valve fury with long-distance comfort and uncanny stability. Its nearly 1-liter inline-4 delivered a relentless surge to a top speed near 150 miles per hour. But what set the Hurricane apart was its poise. A steel box section frame, telescopic forks, and Honda's Pro-Link rear suspension made it both razor-sharp at speed and remarkably forgiving on long rides. Dual front discs with Nissan calipers kept that power under control, while the 6-speed gearbox made highway cruising effortless. The Hurricane was proof you didn't need to sacrifice comfort for speed. But even with all that polish, it didn't deliver the gut punch riders craved in raw acceleration. Yamaha had a totally different answer. A machine that didn't just go fast, it launched forward with earth-shaking torque and a presence unlike anything else on the road. Number 7, the Yamaha V-Max. In 1985, Yamaha didn't just build a motorcycle, they built a legend. The V-Max exploded onto the scene as the ultimate muscle bike, a machine so outrageous in its design and performance that it still has the power to humble many modern cruisers and even a few sport bikes. At the center of the storm was a 1,197 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V4 engine that pumped out an eye-watering 145 horsepower at 9,000 revolutions per minute. Torque, 83 pound-feet delivered with a punch that made roll-on acceleration feel more like being launched than riding. The secret weapon was Yamaha's V-Boost system, which opened additional intake runners at higher revs. When that surge hit, the V-Max transformed from a strong cruiser into a straight-line missile, delivering quarter-mile times in the low 11s, performance that still embarrasses plenty of modern machines. Of course, the V-Max was no lightweight. Its steel frame and hefty build gave it presence, while 40mm Kayaba forks and dual shocks at the rear tried to keep the beast in check. Handling wasn't razor-sharp, but that was never the point. This bike was about visceral thrills, the sound, the shove, the sheer drama of twisting the throttle. Top speed hovered around 150 miles per hour, but the V-Max's true reputation came from its unstoppable mid-range punch. Back in the mid-80s, the price tag sat around $9,000, positioning it as a premium muscle bike. Today, clean early models often trade hands between $2,500 and $4,000. A bargain for a motorcycle that still delivers raw adrenaline, better than many brand new cruisers costing 5 times as much. The V-Max was about brute force, drag strip swagger, and roll-on fury. But not every rider wanted a power cruiser. Some demanded a motorcycle that looked like nothing else, one that combined radical design with superbike punch. That combination arrived in the Katana, a machine so ahead of its time that even today's retro attempts can't quite match its impact. Number 6. The Suzuki GSX1100 Katana. Few motorcycles have ever blended radical design with real-world performance the way Suzuki did in 1980 with the GSX1100 Katana. This machine didn't just enter the market, it slashed it wide open. Styled by German designer Hans Muth, its sharp, blade-like bodywork was so futuristic that many riders thought it looked more like a prototype from a science fiction film than a production motorcycle. Even today, 4 decades later, the Katana's silhouette can stop riders in their tracks. But this bike was not just about its looks. Beneath the aggressive fairing sat a 1,074 cubic centimeter, air-cooled 16-valve inline-4 engine, producing over 110 horsepower. In an era when most street bikes were still pushing less, the Katana charged past 135 miles per hour with ease. Some testers claimed it could touch 140, making it one of the fastest production motorcycles on the planet at the time. Suzuki paired that engine with a steel frame, anti-dive front forks, and a comfortable yet commanding riding position. The result was a superbike that balanced brutal straight-line power with long-haul usability, a combination that modern sport bikes, overloaded with electronics, sometimes miss entirely. Its mid-range torque made it forgiving, while its stability at high speeds earned it respect on both highways and racetracks. Today, original 80s Katanas are highly sought after, with prices ranging from just over $7,000 to well above $13,000, depending on condition. The fact that Suzuki revived the Katana name in recent years at nearly $17,000 only proves how timeless the original's legacy remains. The GSX1100's Katana was daring, distinctive, and devastatingly fast. But while Suzuki sliced into the future with sharp edges, Kawasaki was preparing a bike that would completely change the rules of performance forever. Number 5. The Kawasaki GPZ900R. In 1984, Kawasaki didn't just release a new sport bike. They redefined what a superbike could be. The GPZ900R, the very first motorcycle to wear the Ninja name, marked the birth of the modern superbike era. At its core was a 9/108 cubic centimeter, liquid-cooled, 16-valve inline-4 producing 115 horsepower and 63 pound-feet of torque. Numbers like that meant a top speed pushing 155 miles per hour, making it the fastest production bike in the world at launch. But speed alone didn't make the Ninja legendary. It was how Kawasaki packaged it, by slimming the engine, tucking the cam chain to the side, and mounting it in a steel spine frame. The Ninja handled with an agility no rival could match. Telescopic forks up front and Kawasaki's Unitrack rear suspension gave it precision, stability, and that aggressive riding stance that still feels thrilling today. Back then, the GPZ900R sold for just over $3,000 in the US. Today, clean survivors run between $2,500 and $7,000, still one of the best deals in classic motorcycling. The GPZ900R was the nuclear strike that launched the Ninja dynasty, liquid cooling, razor aerodynamics, and a top speed that stunned the 80s. But as advanced as it was still built for the street. Some riders wanted something rarer, sharper, and tuned for the track itself. That's when Honda unleashed a race-bred masterpiece, a homologation jewel that handled like no street bike had before. Number 4, the Honda VFR750R RC30. If there's one motorcycle from the 1980s that proves how far ahead Japan was thinking, it's Honda's VFR750R, better known as the RC30. Launched between 1977 and 1990, this machine wasn't built to simply sell motorcycles. It was built to dominate racetracks around the world. Unlike the everyday VFR750F, the RC30 was a handcrafted homologation special, born to meet world superbike rules. At its heart lay a 748 cubic centimeter, liquid-cooled V4 engine with gear-driven cams, titanium connecting rods, and a radical Big Bang firing order. That unique setup delivered 112 horsepower at 11,500 RPM with uncanny traction and throttle precision. It was pure race DNA distilled into a road-legal package. But power was only half the story. Weighing in at just under 400 pounds dry, the RC30's aluminum beam frame, pro-arm single-sided swing arm, and fully adjustable suspension gave it scalpel-sharp handling. Add in dual 310mm discs with powerful calipers, a high first gear perfect for tight circuits, and a slipper clutch that tamed aggressive downshifts. Features unheard of on road bikes at the time, priced at around £8,500 in the UK, or well over $10,000 in the US. It was eye-wateringly expensive back then. Today, pristine examples easily command $18,000 to $42,000, cementing the RC30 as one of the most collectible motorcycles on the planet. The RC30 wasn't about flashy numbers. It was about balance, precision, and the kind of engineering perfection that still embarrasses many modern superbikes. Built to win, and win it did, but its exclusivity and sky-high price put it out of reach for most riders. The masses needed a superbike that was just as ferocious, but bigger, brasher, and built for domination. Yamaha answered with a flagship that redefined leader-class performance in 1977 and made sheer speed its calling card. Now for our top three. Kicking off the podium, number 3, the Yamaha FZR1000. If the 1980s gave us a single machine that rewrote the rules of what a sport bike could be, it was the Yamaha FZR1000. Launched in 1987, this wasn't just another fast motorcycle. It was the birth of the hyper-sports category, a term Yamaha proudly coined as they unveiled technology that left rivals scrambling to catch up. At its core sat a 998 cubic centimeter, liquid-cooled inline-4 engine producing between 136 and 148 horsepower, depending on the year and model. The 1989 X-Up version, with its exhaust valve system, smoothed out mid-range torque and delivered a relentless surge of acceleration. 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, and a top speed pushing 167 miles per hour made it one of the quickest street-legal motorcycles on Earth, and still a serious threat today. But what truly cemented the FZR's legend wasn't raw horsepower. It was Yamaha's groundbreaking Delta Box aluminum perimeter frame, a direct lift from racing technology that gave unprecedented rigidity, balance, and razor-sharp handling. Even with a dry weight just over 460 pounds, the bike flicked through corners with a precision that embarrassed heavier superbikes of the ERA, including Suzuki's GSXR1100. Riders often claim that on technical, twisty roads, the FZR still holds its own against modern machines. Back in the late 80s, this engineering marvel commanded a premium price. Today, well-kept examples can still be found in the $2,000 to $10,000 range, making it one of the most accessible icons of the period. The Yamaha FZR1000 wasn't just fast. It reshaped sport bike design for decades to come. A true hypersport pioneer that still destroys expectations. And now, as we enter the final stretch of this countdown, get ready, because number 2 is a machine so ferocious, it forced the entire motorcycle world to raise its game. Suzuki's Gixxer wasn't just fast. It was raw, unrefined violence on 2 wheels, the kind of litter bike that still makes modern superbikes nervous. Our runner-up in the spotlight. Number 2, the Suzuki GSXR1100. If the 1980s had a motorcycle that completely rewrote the rulebook for big-bore superbikes, it was the Suzuki GSXR1100. Introduced in 1986, this was not just another fast machine. It was the lightest open-class sport bike of its time, weighing in at only about 435 pounds dry. That featherweight figure gave it razor-sharp agility and acceleration that embarrassed heavier rivals like Honda's VF1000R and Kawasaki's GPZ900R. At its heart, the GSXR packed a 1,052 cubic centimeter, oil-cooled inline-4 with double overhead cams, pumping out 125 horsepower at 8,500 RPM. That muscle sent it through the quarter mile in under 11 seconds and to a top speed near 150 miles per hour. Even today, those numbers keep it in the fight against modern leader-class machines. What truly set the GSXR apart was its racing DNA. Suzuki built a race bike you could ride home, with an aluminum frame, dual 310mm discs, 4-piston calipers, wide tires, and a steering damper. It dominated production racing and carved its legend into the Isle of Man TT. Fast forward to today, and clean GSXR 1100s trade between $3,000 and $7,000, while Suzuki's 2025 retro reissue starts just under 20 grand. The GSXR 1100 wasn't just a superbike. It was a revolution, a monster of power, precision, and presence that still destroys expectations. The GSXR 1100 was a monster. Huge power, huge presence, and still a legend at the drag strip. But even with all that chaos, one machine from the 80s represents the perfect balance of power, precision, and enduring dominance. It's the motorcycle that riders still whisper about, the icon that proved Japan could build not just fast bikes, but eternal ones. And at the top of the mountain, we give that crown to the king. Our grand champion, number 1, the Suzuki GSXR750. If there's one motorcycle from the 1980s that didn't just raise the bar, but completely redefined it, it's the Suzuki GSXR750. Launched in 1985, this bike created the modern sport bike formula: lightweight, razor handling, and pure race-bred engineering. At just 387 pounds dry, it was astonishingly light for its era, thanks to its pioneering aluminum frame. Underneath, a 149 cubic centimeter inline 4 pushed out nearly 100 horsepower, propelling it to a top speed just shy of 150 miles per hour. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The GSXR handled with a sharpness that stunned riders. Its chassis balance, 4-piston brakes, and suspension turned every corner into a racetrack. It wasn't just fast, it felt alive. 4 decades later, the GSXR750 remains a legend. Affordable, collectible, and still devastatingly quick. It earns its crown as the #1 Japanese motorcycle of the 1980s that destroys modern bikes. And if this countdown of iconic 80s Japanese motorcycles got your heart racing and left you craving more stories of the machines that changed the game, click the video on the screen, like, and subscribe to stay connected with us. We'll keep bringing you the most electrifying motorcycle legends, their secrets, and the rides that still blow minds today.